Sibley, leader of the James Moore manufacturing team. I'm here with Kevin Golden, one of my partners and member of the James Moore manufacturing team as well. Today, we're joined by Kevin Carr, the Chief Executive Officer of FloridaMakes. FloridaMakes is an organization designed to strengthen the Florida manufacturing industry through its services and connections. A big part of being a successful manufacturing company is building the right relationships to help you achieve your goals, build value in your company. Also, being in tune with what is going on in your market areas is not only insightful, but help you make the right business decisions. So today we'll chat about FloridaMakes and the manufacturing climate here in Florida and how FloridaMakes continues to help and support the manufacturing community here. So Kevin, thanks for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. And as a fellow Kevin, definitely thanks for joining us. And you Kevin are the CEO of FloridaMakes. So tell us a little bit more about FloridaMakes and specifically maybe your role there.
So FloridaMakes is a part of a much larger network nationally called the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. Manufacturing Extension Partnership is a program that was established by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I'm giving you a lot of gobbledygook here, out of the U.S. Department of Commerce, but it was established back in '88 to be kind of a parallel to agricultural extension and focus on industrial extension. The idea there was, at the time, some of the Western Pacific nations were sort of beating up manufacturing pretty badly. And, they figured, well, let's see what we can do to help remediate some of that. Ag extension worked really well. Can we apply that to industrial extension? And so they created this program, and there's an extension center like FloridaMakes in every state plus Puerto Rico. And the mission is really to help improve productivity and technological performance of U.S. manufacturing, in our case, Florida manufacturing, with an emphasis on the smaller firms. And that becomes particularly important in a state like Florida, where 80% of the manufacturers in Florida are under 20 employees. So you might not see the big headquarters manufacturing operations in Florida, but you see a tremendous number of foundation firms. At last count, we were approaching 27,000 manufacturing establishments, and that's kind of a big number for Florida. And a surprising number for Florida, too. Most people in Florida, citizens and policymakers, don't necessarily think of Florida as a manufacturing hub, but it's becoming a manufacturing hub driven by defense, driven by aviation, space, what's happening on the Space Coast. A lot of that is having a really positive effect on the manufacturing economy down here in Florida.
Now, Kevin, you mentioned, I was going to ask the question about what is considered small, but you said it right there that 80% of them are probably under 20 employees and so forth. So that kind of spells that out. I'm curious, do you happen to know maybe what the average age of those manufacturing companies are that make up that 80%?
No, that's a great question, but I don't know the answer to it. I imagine there's been a lot of startups. We started down here in 2015, there were 19,000 firms. So that count has increased by 8,000. So I imagine there are a lot of young firms. A lot of them could be transplants, but I don't have a handle on that. It's a good question, though.
Yeah, no, I figured with the height, obviously everything's measured before and after COVID and so forth. And then the climate pushing a lot of businesses, and like you said yourself, manufacturing to Florida, I kind of assume the same, that a good majority of those are probably, relatively young. And given that there's been a large influx since 2019, that kind of confirms that.
Yeah.
Not all, but just a good chunk of those are. So that's fair.
I think the state was number one in terms of new business startups. That's all businesses. So you got to figure there's a lot of manufacturers in that mix. But then there's also a lot of supply chain, or suppliers, I should say, kind of moving closer to the point of use. So, if you were a SpaceX and you were here, years ago, you were still pulling on suppliers from a lot of other places. A lot of them suppliers have moved and relocated. and moves closer to the end use. Particularly in the case of companies like that. And I think they just had launch number 75 or 76 or something for this year. So as that frequency increases, which is expected, that turnaround time, that cycle time, they're ready to uh, launch another spacecraft requires close proximity of your supply chains.
Well, and with 1,000 people or so a day coming into Florida, I expect that to continue to increase. And so it's going to be really, really important for Florida to continue to build the infrastructure, the resources, and the support to help these businesses that are coming here thrive. So it's going to be a team effort between all the various associations, the state, the businesses themselves, the local communities, and so on, to make sure this happens in a way that makes sense for the state of Florida. So it's a good thing, and I think it's something that we want to keep seeing built here. So, Kevin, I know that you work, all over the state. You guys are involved, I know, in various reports and analysis on the manufacturing industry. Can you give us some insight into the status of manufacturing in the Florida market? Just some of the key highlights and things going on here.
Yeah, we just at the end of last year finished working on a report supporting the Department of Commerce, and it's called 2023 Florida Manufacturing. Pretty vanilla title, but
but it works.
it works. And the 2023 is hopeful that we'll do it again, putting that in the title. But we believe it's the first of its kind, where somebody's kind of taking a step back and taking a look at the sector, taking a look at that ecosystem, taking a look at where some of the big industries are. And things that jump out of the report are things like our manufacturing, GDP has grown from 2014 to, with the latest data we had to work on with the report was 2022. So it's grown over that period from about 43 billion to about 74 billion. And you don't see any kind of growth like that anywhere in the country. Some of that could be, we've got this population. With that population comes farms and growth like that. And we're blessed to have that population because a lot of manufacturing states are losing people, losing companies. So, they're all going to Florida. Great. But when we compare ourselves, if you look at the top, at the time of that report, we ranked 12th in terms of manufacturing employment. And actually, the day we published it, we ranked 10th, so we're growing. But if you look at those states that were above us in terms of manufacturing employment, no one grew at that rate. And so, the closest was California, which surprises me. You think they would get to the point of saturation, but they're still growing pretty rapidly. But Florida, really grossly outpaced, I would say, the other 10 states. And you're seeing even negative growth in some of the Midwestern states, the traditional manufacturing states. So, make you blame us, I guess, I don't know. But we saw that. And you also see that when it comes to manufacturing employment growth. Like I said during the report, when we started the report, we were ranked at 12th. And then sometime in September, while the ink wasn't even wet yet, I should say, that number changed and we became 10th. We passed Georgia and New York, and we flipped back and forth with Georgia, but we're in that 10th, 11th range. And my projection is that we keep growing like this, that we will wind up, and we're the third most populous state. We will probably wind up somewhere near 3, 4, or 5 in terms of our manufacturing, status, steady state. 2030, 2035. I think we're coming from behind a little bit because traditionally we've never positioned ourselves as a manufacturing state. So to your question, that infrastructure, that support system actually needs to be built and developed around that kind of growth. And, one criticism that I've had that we're beginning to see conversation about is, if you look at it, if you go to Tallahassee, there's no place to go to for manufacturing. There's no committee for manufacturing. There's no agency dedicated to manufacturing. So the Department of Commerce has made a step forward with this report, and they've deputized one of their deputy secretaries as a chief manufacturing officer. And that's a step in the right direction. But when you compare it to other traditional Florida industries, some of those have whole agencies dedicated to them, agriculture, tourism, transportation. So manufacturing is coming from behind. Uh, but we have the assets, we have the infrastructure. We just need to create that. I would say that uh, more comforting business environment, policy environment, and support environment. To your point, it takes the whole community to pull this off. So you're talking economic development, your workforce boards, all those things have to be pointed in that direction. You've seen that experience in other states like a South Carolina or an Alabama when they made a decision and they oriented their strategic direction around growth in manufacturing, they excelled. And so we're sort of in that transition state where we're waking up Florida to, hey, you are a manufacturing state. And to his credit, Secretary Kelly opened up the report in his preface by saying Florida is a manufacturing state. That was a bold statement to make. Uh, but like I said, we have to get beyond our identity of beaches and oranges. There's a lot more going on in Florida, and this is a substantial industry that can have a substantial impact, I think, on the standard of living. I got to try not to answer your next 10 questions in every question you ask me. So I'll
No, I
stop.
think I think your point though, one of the things that manufacturing brings when you start talking about, um, just ability to make a living, uh, manufacturing wages are typically higher on average than things like tourism, things like some of the other, not to beat on any other industry too much, but the average wages get higher. And then you get into some of the things like, welding and, as you make your way up into management and those kind of things. And there can be some really high paying jobs in manufacturing. It's not just and it's getting very high tech in a lot of ways. It's not just the old, uh, what you might think of if you picture a manufacturing facility 120 years ago. It's not that anymore. And I know I've been working in the manufacturing community for a long time. And that's one of the things we focused on when we start talking to high schoolers and even earlier is it's not what you think it is. And oftentimes it's the parents we have to
Oh, it is.
deal with on that side of things.
It is the parents. And I mean that's 30, 40, maybe 50 years of acculturation there that said, hey, this is what you're going to do, and you don't want to go into this. But it's kind of interesting. So it suffers a little bit of an identity crisis. But to your point, when we begin to start looking at wages, these are much higher. I think the average wage in manufacturing across the state is like 70,000. If you get into a county like Brevard, that approaches like 100. You mentioned welders. There are welders out there making six figures. And that there's a lot of college graduates that don't approach those figures. And so it's a matter of reimagining, you know, uh, careers in the country. And so I think the state is doing a particularly good job at, trying to promote the trades, trying to promote apprenticeships. I spoke to a representative yesterday, and she called it the people in the middle. How do we approach the folks in the middle and show these opportunities?
Mhm.
Every October we do participate in something called Manufacturing Month, and try to pull as many young folks, I would say middle school, high school, through companies to see those opportunities. That's another challenge, is you don't know what's out there. We drive by manufacturing firms without ever knowing what's there. We know what, you know how to work in a McDonald's, but you don't know what this opportunity is. And in one of those visits a couple of years back, uh, one of the owners of the company took the students out to the parking lot and showed them what kind of cars the people drive. I thought that was kind of an interesting approach. Here's a car you can drive if you work in a place like this. It's a very important, transition back to that kind of economy and that kind of mindset. But it requires, to your point, it requires more exposure of students. I heard a saying once by a guy from the upscale America. He says, if they can't see it, they can't be it. So exposing people to those jobs and those opportunities, and to your point, exposing the parent too. So we'll drive parents through these visits as well. Uh, so we suffer a little bit of an identity crisis based on history, as you pointed out, dirty, dingy, dangerous, whatever the 3Ds were. It's not that world. It's certainly not that world in Florida. A lot of our industries are advanced industries. So you're not going to find people putting buttons in the little boxes down here. Those kind of jobs have disappeared and they've gone overseas. There's, they're kind of lower margin opportunities. And here you're looking at, more advanced industries, electronics, space. So, some of these facilities you could eat off the floor. So it's not that kind of environment. So, but it requires a little bit of a rebranding of, of the opportunity for young people. And, you could say manufacturing, you could talk about mechatronics and robotics. Again, two different reactions. Oh yeah, I want to do that, but I don't want to do that. Well, we got to work on that.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, we talk, you talk a lot about, hey, Florida, we're now a manufacturing state and so forth. And in any industry, looking at your competition is healthy, right? Having competition is healthy. It's good, right? You can learn from one another and probably brings out the best in one another. What is the state of Florida doing if we're kind of on this more, okay, we're growing a lot, we're growing faster than the 10 above states and so forth in manufacturing. But there's also a lot of those states I'd imagine are pretty traditional or historically been traditionally manufacturing states. Now, what are we looking at, in terms of that competition and to what we can learn from them that will help us maybe build that infrastructure, build that workforce and so forth? Because as we're attracting these companies, clearly they're here and they're continuing to grow. Obviously, sustaining that and continue to build upon that is important. So what can we do to learn from some of those states, maybe who have been doing that longer from us, but at the same time, take that into the new economy and reality that we find ourselves in?
I think the two major drivers right now, number one will be workforce. And number two, I would say behind it is your system of supply. When a company is thinking about where do I want to start up or where do I want to relocate to, those are going to be the driving force. And so, in the past, there was a lot more, where can I get the best tax incentive to go relocate my plant? Now people are going, where are the people? And not only the existing workforce, but where is that pipeline? I think one of the things that Florida has done well and is doing well is investing in that workforce. We've got one of the best university systems in the country. I think US News puts us up at the top. And then behind that, you've also got, a really strong system of colleges and producing the manufacturing technicians. There's about 24 colleges out there with programs that are producing the technicians that we need. And then bringing that even further up, in the talent development pipeline, you're beginning to see apprenticeships and micro credentialing and things like that the state has put a lot of emphasis on. And, I think that'll only increase over time. And there doesn't seem to be any reluctance on the part of the government in investing more in the workforce. I think they see that 1,100 new people a day as an exciting opportunity, but also a challenge of what kind of jobs are we going to place them in. The other area where I think we can develop more is in our supply chains, and that's where some of the work that we do comes in terms of helping companies grow, helping companies identify new opportunities. That's great that we've got these companies, these large primes that have relocated to the area and they're launching rockets or they're building weapon systems. Where are they drawn on their system of supply? To the extent that we can get a bigger piece of that, that would be great. The other area where I think, I just did a panel at a Florida Supply Chain Summit, and there was someone on the panel who was involved in site selection. And, her big emphasis, an area where she felt like there needed to be more investment, and that was in the infrastructure, which you talked about. So, the state has, dropped $100 million in a lot of investment in infrastructure around the state. Her comment was, geez, we need to do 10 times that, to catch up to where the other states are. You see that in places like Texas, and some of these folks that are going after some of that big chips money. They've been investing in that infrastructure and digging those holes well in advance of some of these opportunities. So again, we're playing a little catch up there, but I don't think there's any reluctance on the part of our policymakers. I think some of it is that, there's maybe some direction needed in terms of where do we focus that attention? Where are the next big industries? Where are the opportunities within the state? So, like I said, we've done this study to outline here's your big industries. There was also another study that was just finished that you might want to take a look at by the Council of 100, where they're looking at the clusters within the state, the natural clustering that's occurring. That study was done by McKinsey for them. And that also is done with the orientation of, with the idea of helping focus where those investments need to be. So, we're kind of hitting Florida right now. I want to say at its crossroads, but I think they've sort of already crossed that mark, and now it's a matter of focusing that investment, focusing that attention. But the two big areas where I think we're learning is people. And if you go to any other state and talk to any other folk involved in manufacturing, they'll all tell you the same problem. I'm not even sure this is as unique to manufacturing as it's been, because you're hearing the same thing from other sectors. What do you need? I need people. I need people that are trained. I need people that are digitally savvy. They're not necessarily looking for 4-year degree people. They're looking for people that they can, bring in, develop, and train as part of their workforce. And that requires, some base level skills. But that's the real challenge.
It is, and I think it's a national challenge in every industry, across all the industries, and that, we have a lot of people retiring in this country, a lot of baby boomers, and, you look at birth rates and other things, and we're going to have a challenge. And so, for manufacturers, that's what you also see a lot of automation, investments in automation, investments in AI, investments in other things to try to combat a little bit of the labor issue, obviously the efficiency side of things. So, on top of, some of those investments in infrastructure, other things, now you've got the companies on their side making investments in equipment and other capital type needs to improve their production processes.
Yeah, and I think that's that's sort of a given. It's sort of you need to do these base things if you want to stay in the game.
Exactly.
That's an area where we need to work a little bit harder. One of the things that we point out in our report is, and this has to do with our growth, but while we might be kicking butt when it comes to GDP growth And when it comes to workforce growth, our productivity still lags behind national averages. And so that's an area where we've got to pay more attention. And it gets to your point of efficiency, you know? Okay, so we got these people and we're producing these products, but are we doing it as competitively as some of the other states or some of the other countries? I forget, somebody said we're like 15th largest country if we were to be a, you know, so that's the playing field that we're dealing with now. And so we lag nationally in that productivity average. And that to me leaves GDP on the table, you know, because I take our workforce and I go through this exercise in one of the presentations I give. I take our current workforce and I multiply it by the national productivity average, the national output per person average. And we're leaving about 16 billion on the table with the existing workforce based on inefficiency. How do you address that? You address that greater use of technology. You know, we've got to pick up those new tools, like you're saying. These companies are adopting them. That's not even just a replacement strategy. That's an efficiency strategy. Uh, Upskilling our workforce. You know, that technology is changing so rapidly. Yet we have, I'll say, an incumbent workforce that spans about 40 years. You know, I've been at this almost 40 years. Those folks have to be brought up the curve. It's not just, you know, the guys coming in the front end, the people coming in the front end, and the young people, they get it already. They are digitally savvy. They were digitally savvy when they were 10, you know, so we've got that challenge with our incumbent workforce. So that's two areas. Growing the supply chains, focusing more on high value, high trade industries. And then from an economic development standpoint, focusing on attracting and developing and investing in high trade, high value industries. You know, we want to do rocket ships, we want to do semiconductors, we want to do advanced packaging. You know, let somebody else do the straw hats. You know, we're not interested in that, but we need to do that well. So, you know, we have our work cut out for us with the companies that are out there and helping them become more aware of the state of technology usage, the state of workforce skill, you know, and that becomes a challenge when you're dealing with a workforce and when you're dealing with a population of companies that are very small. You know, those guys are focused on Friday's product. They, you know, don't tell me what my floor should look like 3 years from now. Whereas a big company, they have an advanced manufacturing team that's already knows what the factory floor is going to look like 3 years from now. They might be working on a digital twin. Uh, on the other end of the spectrum, what's a digital twin? You know, so that's kind of where we're at. You know, we have to refresh, enhance, and help build that workforce, and that's kind of where, you know, the work that we do comes in. The work that the colleges do come in. You know, we all have a stake in improving that productivity. Some with people, some with technology, some with supply chains. So, and then on top of that, you know, I think we didn't really talk too much about, you know, more and more investment capital. I think you're seeing investment capital beginning to flow into the state in a way that's never done before. So we got a lot of good things coming together, but they require work, you know, hard work to pull them all and organize them all and optimize them all.
Sure. So, you know, as we kind of get into final thoughts here, we talked a lot about the state of manufacturing and what the state of Florida is doing. Any advice or thoughts to manufacturers themselves to say, hey, here's what you should do to get involved. Here's how you can try to get yourself involved in, say, the local level of workforce, schools, things like that. What kind of advice might you have for or thoughts for the manufacturers themselves?
Well, at the local level, I think do what you can to network with other companies. There's not much you can learn with your head down and not looking outside your own box, you know, if your box being your building. So I'm a big advocate. Florida Makes obviously is a big advocate for manufacturing associations. It was created by manufacturing associations. And those companies learn a lot, not from organizations like us, but from organizations like them, getting in a room, working with each other, talking to each other, visiting each other's factories. A lot of these associations do a plant tour or two every month. I remember hearing a guy from Lockheed said, it doesn't know how small a company was. I always learn when I go on these visits how somebody does something better than us. So you always hear about continuous lifelong learning. That goes for the business too. So I think it begins there. Connect with your local workforce boards. Connect with your local community colleges, 2-year colleges. They're trying to serve you as a manufacturer, but they don't know unless you tell them what the target is. So they need to learn more about what your needs are and vice versa. You might even be able to support those needs. You'll see some companies work with, corporate colleges. I'm thinking of down in Polk, where companies actually come in and they do some of the training within those facilities of their staff. So I think there needs to be a closer integration of that education function. We probably got to rethink some of that. Because it can't just be, we can produce this every 2 years. There's got to be sort of more of a continuous interaction. So capitalizing on that, and then getting to know what some of your resources are that are out there. We work with a group, Florida First Capital, that makes below market capital available for a lot of these equipment investments that you're talking about. I need to upgrade my facility. There's a lot of assets out there, SBDCs, groups like Florida First Capital, and even your economic development organizations within the region that can lead you to those kind of assets. But like I said, if you just have your head down and you're not looking outside the walls of your own company, I don't know where the learning will take place. So, that's some of the challenges I think that companies face. And you see the ones that thrive are the ones that are out there. There are ones that are looking, so.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes it's tough to get, especially some of the smaller companies are so busy just trying to get the order out tomorrow. And very difficult sometimes to pop away. But I agree with you. That lifelong learning, seeing what others are doing, how you can do it better, challenging yourself in that way is a great way to build your business or to continue to improve your business. So, it's great advice, Kevin. Really, really appreciate your time here. I think it was a good analysis of where things are at now and some good advice to manufacturers. So, thank you very much for being on with us today.
Oh, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I enjoyed it.
And for all our listeners, thank you for listening as always. If you have any needs or questions, please feel free to reach out. And with that, everyone have a great day.
To learn more about James Moore & Company's manufacturing services, go to jmco.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our More on Manufacturing series to receive updates when new videos and podcasts are released. If you'd like to be a guest, or if there's a topic you'd like to see covered on a future episode, contact us on our website. You can also follow us on social media for more news as the landscape on manufacturing continues to rapidly evolve.